Come on in, grab a seat. This looks pretty comfortable. I'm just gonna chill here. Sorry, I was gonna see how long I could drag out that awkward pause. It became too awkward for myself. Good morning, everyone. Yes, yes. Welcome back, or welcome to people who are just arriving today. This is Net Impact 2019, Widening the Lens. My name is Mohan Sivaloganathan, aka Amen. I'm going to be your MC. I've been your MC since yesterday. Going to continue to be that for today and for tomorrow. Man, this is pretty awesome. This is a good way to start the day. I do just want to be clear on something, which is that I'm not supposed to be here. I also want to be clear that you're not supposed to be here. So what do I mean by that? Well, so quickly myself, my backstory, my parents immigrated to the US over 30 years ago. They came here in pursuit of the American dream, which is that, you work hard and you can make it. And it definitely was not that easy because they came to the country with nothing in their pockets, not even exaggerate, like literally nothing. They were couch surfing, they were staying at local community centers just trying to find a place to sleep, working multiple jobs in order to be able to survive. Cleaning, bussing tables, serving, working in the pharmacy, sewing clothes at a costume store, just to be able to survive so that we could fast forward several years so that I could be here on this stage as this shaved head, thick glasses, Sri Lankan son of immigrants who majored in electrical engineering, who somehow became a hip hop artist and working in the social impact sector. So like that story, thank you. That story's that's not supposed to happen, right? That's not typically the way things are written. But add another layer on top of that. And think about what we're hearing about in society more and more these days. We're hearing these stories about how immigrants aren't welcome. We're hearing these stories that almost normalize inequity and injustice as if that's just a way of life. We get told time and time again to just stay in our lanes. So I'm not supposed to be here, but for all of you, I'm sure you've heard a message like that at some point in your life. You might be hearing it right now. You might have heard something like, oh, you're too young, you're too naive, like you don't know the real world. Or that systems, that's just the way it is, and you just kind of have to bite the bullet and just deal with it. Or you might hear that, hey, this isn't the time and place for you to speak about racism, inequity, gender inequality, our suffering planet. It's not the time and place. But what all of you are doing anyway is you're saying, actually, I have the audacity, I have the belief, the hope, and the vision to know where this world needs to go. You are going on and creating your own enterprises. You are revolutionizing the way that schools operate, that businesses operate. You are saying that I'm going to make sure that you hear my voice. You're going to feel the effects of my action because we cannot wait. So you are saying that, hey, even though I hear that I'm not supposed to be here, well, guess what? I am here. And if you look around this room, multiply that by 1,000, it's going to turn into 1,600 over the span of multiple days. That's what it means to widen the lens, because we're completely changing the way people view where we're supposed to be. Because yes, we are here right now, out here to change this world. So I want everybody to embrace that as you go through the span of these next couple of days. And the stories that you are going to hear from this stage over the next couple of hours are from incredible people who are also saying that I am here right now, and I'm going to widen that lens of what is possible. And what we're going to do to start out this day is you're going to hear from some incredible people from the Net Impact family who have dedicated themselves to ensuring that you are able to find your place here in this incredible community. So I want you to welcome our new CEO, Peter Lupoff, and our members from our board, Dave Stangus and Cicely Joseph.
Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe, so clear.
Good morning, everybody. I can't see you at all with these lights, so I have to apologize for that. Unlike Mohan, I think I'm actually supposed to be here. You heard the stories last night from Detroit. How many of you were here in the room? I think most of you. Who weren't in the room? Who wasn't in the room last night? Put your hand up. Talk to somebody that has their hand down. It was an amazing story last night. All about Detroit, all about the history. This is my home as well. I grew up here. I was born here. Those of you from Michigan know we all carry a map. I lived right here. We're right here. And, those of us that are true Michiganders, we actually carry two maps, the Lower Peninsula and those that are in the Upper Peninsula, too. So you got the Yoopers in the room. Any Yoopers in the room? Probably not. It's a little hall. The one thing I want to say, a few things, I'm going to be quick this morning, just want to introduce a few topics here. But the one thing I want to say is I want to thank the sponsors. This conference would not happen without the help of these sponsors. Look at the signs, thank them. Do more than clap, though. When you get out there, say hello to them, introduce yourself to them, go visit them, make some conversations with them. As a student-led organization, nonprofit, the ticket revenue from this conference doesn't cover half the cost. It's the sponsors that make this thing happen. Some of the professionals in the room, and some of the students as well, may know we've had a pretty transitional year at Net Impact. We're on the search for a new CEO this year, and we found a diamond in the rough. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I thought we were going to get into this year. But it was really a great time to reflect, right, on who we were, who we are, and where we can go as an organization, as Net Impact. And it's really all about anchored in you, anchored in our members, anchored in our students, in our professional networks. Chapters are the anchor, and they continue to grow. Chapters all around the world. We were surprised when we start to roll up these numbers, more than 400 chapters worldwide, 432 to be exact. Hopefully maybe 433 or 34 by the time we're done here. The newest one is one of the ones right here in Detroit, the Detroit Professional Chapter. A lot of work went into that. And, as a time where everybody's kind of picking sides in this world, it's great to see our chapters come together as a place to operate. I spent 12 years at Intel Corporation and another 11 years at Campbell Soup Company, and companies have been a great partner for Net Impact all along, right? So you got the chapter network and the company network, and there's companies here today in the room, out in the expos, out in our new solution showcase in Career Central. Make sure you check those people out, and they're bringing great stories, and they're really looking into the future of impact. And then finally, the conference. We've been around for 27 years, and the conference and the organization has evolved. And it's really all today about the people that show up here. We started, as some of you know, in college classrooms and auditoriums. We grew out of that about 10 years ago, and now we fill convention centers like this one in Detroit. And with a theme like widening the lens, you picked a little bit up on it last night, and you'll hear more and more. There's lots of ways to get into impact and into purpose and into mission. And a conference like this, you see it, you show up, I'm impressed. I mean, we were working hard, but the staff, and it's a small staff this year, guys. It's a tight, hardworking staff. Some of them are behind the scenes right now, behind the screen. But those that are out here, can I ask you to stand up if any of you are out there, and just another recognition for the staff on this conference. They're standing up behind the curtain too. I want to ask one other group, small group, a couple, I'm not going to do a Mohan thing. We're not going to run around and do high fives and fist pumps, but I want to ask the board of directors of Net Impact. It's a small group. You've seen the names show up on the screen a little bit this morning if you were looking. I'd like to ask them to stand up just for a second to be recognized. Some of these guys and women are new. Some have been around a while. Stay standing up, board. If you don't mind, stay standing up, board. And the last group I'd like to ask to stand up, and not to be recognized, but I want to make a point here. Professionals in the room, professionals, non-students, can you stand up? You don't have to clap for these guys. That's all right. All right, we'll clap a little bit for them. All right. Look around. Everybody's sitting down. Look around and see who's standing up. This is why you're here. These people, you guys can sit down. These guys are the ones that have the stories, the path. They can tell you as a student or as a young emerging leader how to get into this network and find ways to build purpose. There's 100 different ways to get into this space now. Now, when you get out of here today, make sure you take a hard look at this conference and engage in all of the workshops. The keynotes this morning are going to be fabulous. You're going to learn a lot. Last night was amazing if you weren't here. Tomorrow morning and the closing one tomorrow afternoon, if you miss the one tomorrow afternoon, you will be sorry. You're going to have to go find it online. You're going to have to go watch the webcast somewhere. Get in the room tomorrow for our closing keynote. There are workshops ranging from impact investing, a ton on community involvement. I think I'm looking forward to the one I'm moderating on the future of food later on today. All professionals, chapter leaders, all kinds of great networks and engagement out there. So make sure you take a chance and get to those opportunities and talk to people, build the story, build the connections. That's what you're here for. And finally, I just want to say I've been involved with Net Impact for a long time, really long time, 10 plus years, have been on the advisory board, a company partner, both of the companies that I've worked at. I've been on the board now for 6 years, 2 terms on the board, and had the last year to serve as privilege as chair. And this year, I have to admit, was a labor of love. But it's been worth it, and it's been just a joy to be involved, and I will continue to stay involved. Those of you that know me will see me around, and I'm going to continue to do the work and try to multiply some of the work I've done in the past. But it's an exciting time for Net Impact. Enjoy this time. It's an exciting time. I'm happy to see the new board members come in. And speaking of excitement, I want to introduce you to our new CEO, Peter Lupoff. He's going to come up and tell you a little bit about himself, and then Cicely Joseph's going to come up and do a little Q&A. So you'll get to learn a little bit more about him and engage, and he brings a whole new set of tools to this organization that I think you're going to love. Thank you, have a great morning, and really enjoy the conference.
Good morning, everybody. Come on, good. Welcome to Detroit. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here, this being about 100 days into my tenure as Net Impact's CEO. Very excited to be part of this organization. And as Dave alludes to, I think we recognize that we have a 27-year iconic history that we honor and that we will cherish and bring forward to a new time and place. Dave used the word, I think, divisive, that we're in an odd time now of some divisiveness. But the one thing that I can promise you where we stand as an organization is we stand with you. We stand with NextGen. Our mission is to inspire and equip emerging leaders for a just and sustainable world. I live and breathe that and have for my entire career. I started out as an asset manager, what you might describe as traditional asset management once upon a time. I now think of that as sort of amoral investing. I'm not making a judgment about that. I'm just simply saying that every dollar invested has impact. And by extension, then, with our money, with our effort, and everything we do, we can foment this just and sustainable world. From asset management, I moved into impact investing, where I sought greater intentionality around the social and the environmental objectives that I hope to achieve with money. But I also began to teaching first at Yale School of Management, and then at Fordham. And it's through those experiences I came to know Net Impact chapters and make Net Impact chapters part and parcel of how I drove that mission on campus. So through those activities, I came to know Net Impact Central, and when the opportunity to find this much larger group, a much larger playing field to make a bigger difference with NextGen as part of this organization, I leapt at this opportunity. I relish this opportunity to take us in this direction where we build this sort of capabilities for your benefit of this broader responsibility continuum from social entrepreneurship to change making within companies to how capital is allocated for the benefit of people and planet. So I'm very excited to be here with you today. I ask you to please look for me while we're here. Seek me out. I've met with many of you, talked to many of you already. But I'll come to campus. We can arrange calls. We can arrange visits. I want to be tangibly involved in all of your activities. and help to drive our mission forward. Thank you. Cecily Joseph, our new chairperson, is going to join us on stage now.
Yes, please. Won't you come and put it down on me? I'm right here.
Great. Hello. Hi, Peter.
Hey.
So my job here is to interview you so that we can all learn a little bit more about who you are, learn a little bit about what brought you to Net Impact, kind of what you're thinking about Net Impact today, and what you think about the future. So your resume is very eclectic, and you've shared a little bit, but I think we'd love to hear more. And we'd love to hear about what brought you to Net Impact. What in the journey that we're on, and where you are in this moment in time in your life, made this the right choice for you?
It's interesting you use that word journey. I've thought of this as the way I think about my work and how work and my life are holistic in one, in a way in which once upon a time you might have thought about that word as career. I don't think of it that way anymore, and I think that if you're thinking about purpose, that I'm getting great psychic benefit from helping our emerging leaders find their way in the world. So as mentioned briefly when I was discussing, I think part of it is helping students find their home, helping professionals find their highest and best purpose within business, and a believer in business being a force for good. So Net Impact gives us that broader opportunity to reach more people and to affect greater change. Perhaps really the change needing to be with stewards of capital and companies, and this becomes then a great forum to help foment that change at the company level.
Great. And tell us a little bit about how this role differs from your past roles, right? So you've had a lot of different past roles. You talked a little bit about academia and the work you've done there. But you also ran a hip-hop label, one of my favorite things about you. So how is this role different, or is it a lot the same?
The great thing about the music industry and about a startup, particularly running a hip-hop record label, there's great commonality. The most exciting aspects of it are that the everyday conversations and challenges don't have pat answers, right? If you're dealing with really engaged and capable staff at Net Impact, or engaged and capable community in our network or on campus, you're going to get asked questions that you don't have answers to. And maybe some questions don't have answers or require deeper probing. And I don't have a monopoly on brain power or where things are going. And I think we can get there together. And it's kind of how I have always run the businesses that I've been part of. I've been part of a few. And it's how we intend to run Net Impact as well.
That's great. Thank you. So switching a little bit to Net Impact and today and the impact of today. So you mentioned a little bit about the purpose that you see in this role and what you hope to bring. So with only 100 days under your belt, which isn't that long, but how do you see the role that Net Impact currently plays and will continue to play in the social impact space? The social impact space today is much fuller than it was 27 years ago. There are many different organizations. There are many different causes that people are pursuing. So how do you see Net Impact today in that space?
We are the iconic brand, the iconic entity within the sustainability space. Really proud of that and that heritage. We need to reconcile that iconic brand with an ecosystem that is radically changing and in a very exciting way. There's something right happening with regard to mission when there are such mobilized students. a topic I care very much about are marginalized voices. Marginalized voices may be based on race or gender, sexuality, but it's also based on age. And I found it really fascinating that those that attacked Greta for our climate strike initiative, which was hugely successful, didn't attack her on ideas, but attacked her on her youth. I don't think I'm making a political statement here. But just say again, to reiterate that, if net impact is anything and stands for anything, we stand for Next Gen and their engagement. And what I'm really excited about is the opportunity to activate activism. We are not in ourselves a political organization. We are not activists per se, but I want to activate our Next Gen because the world is in your hands. And when I talked to my 13-year-old son about coming here, Max, I talked to him about what I was going to say, he said, Dad, what you're supposed to do is just get out of the way. and there's something to that. But I think what we can help do is together, we can learn and develop solutions to some of the world's most pressing problems. That the mission of the organization to inspire and equip emerging leaders for a just and sustainable world is a terrific mission. But what we also must do is encourage those stewards of capital, stewards of companies that know in their heart of hearts that this is the direction that the world is going in and this is their legacy, to give you the shot to make that difference, because we need you to make that difference now. If I want to make Max happy and say, I will get out of the way, I also need to make sure that he can be in a place where he can make that difference.
And so switching gears a little bit to the path ahead and looking into the future, and you've touched on it a little bit, but just going a little deeper into what excites you the most about the path that social impact is on in general and the role that we can play in that future as we all move forward together.
So for me, it kind of feels a little bit like this movie in slow motion where it strikes me that there is an inevitability to youth winning out, to Next Gen driving change. And when 181 company CEOs signed the Business Roundtable's redefinition of a corporation to encompass stakeholders more than just shareholder, Milton Friedman's shareholder primacy, but all stakeholders, whether they're consumers, employees, community, supply chain. I think that's given short shrift of how important that is, that businesses are not anthropomorphic, living entities that are making dysfunctional human decisions. They're calculated, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's calculated because they know that this community is driving everything. And so I'm really heartened by the developments I'm seeing in the business community to embrace broader stakeholdership, and I'm heartened by the engagement of Next Gen to help drive that change. And I think that we can help nudge, if I think of net impact as this conduit between the public companies that are our partners and our Next Gen community that is our network, that we can nudge change. Some of that will be also in thought leadership, but in a lot of instances in creating these opportunities through either programs, challenges, grants, the things that we do that I think are going to expand with the expanded definition of stakeholdership.
So in your, sort of finally, just to go a little deeper there, in your, maybe in the past 6 to 12 months, what have you really seen as those motivating pieces of how, and what motivates you about how Next Gen is going to shape our future? Are there some specific examples or things that you've observed?
The level and depth of knowledge on the issues and sophistication around thought and theory for how to address them is stunning. And that's teased out oftentimes by the challenges and programs that Net Impact offers up. The members that I've met here over the last few days, the professional chapters that I visited, the campus chapters, that I've met with. The members I've met just by happenstance. I ran into people in an elevator in Brooklyn wearing a Net Impact 2012 bag, and it turned out that one of them was the professional chapter head from London in that time. And it's just there are so many of us throughout the business community that I think your terrific effort, engagement, intellect, and capabilities will find its place and will drive change. And I see that in sort of every experience I have when I meet with chapters and members directly.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be the chair of Net Impact this year, and I'm honored to work with you and take this movement forward.
Thank you,
Thank you
Cicely.
very
I feel
much.
the same way.
Thank you.
Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe, so player.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Dave, Cicely, Peter, for talking about the vision for what comes next for Net Impact. I want to introduce the next speaker, and there's definitely some personal resonance here for me. So he was a co-founder of Honest Tea, executive chair of Beyond Meat. I'm a vegetarian, so I got to tell you, like, being at a conference that is definitely the most sustainable conference I have ever seen, that is going to have all plant-based food, knowing that when I get into line at lunch, like, I don't have to, like, shove aside, like, the meat eaters who are taking my cheese pizza or my salad or things like that. Like, knowing that, like, hey, we've got something for everybody. Like, that's a beautiful thing. Like, I'm only kind of throwing some shade at meat eaters. Or maybe fully, I don't know, but hey, I'm a vegetarian. Like, finally, like, I've got my place, you know? And so it feels good. I want to introduce someone who has been to probably more Net Impact conferences than anyone, and we are so honored to bring him back here today, Seth Goldman.
Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go a while.
How you guys doing? You got to be fired up. You got to be fired up to be here. This is an amazing gathering, and it's true, this is my 26th consecutive conference, but I only keep coming back because I just get so much out of it. So the first thing I want to do is congratulate you for being in this room. This is a big step. It's a big step in your personal journey and in your career. You've shown you're willing to spend your money and your time and made a commitment to exploring this path. But it's just the first step. And to really get on this path, you've got to make those decisions every day. You heard Peter use the word amoral decisions. I talk about values-neutral decisions. You've got to avoid values-neutral decisions and values-neutral work. There's a great saying, it's one of our Honest Tea bottle cap quotes. It says, if we don't change the direction we are headed, we will end up where we are going. And it's true with your career, but it's especially true with your work. And so you have to find ways to choose life-affirming decisions, diversity-affirming decisions, economic opportunity-affirming decisions. And when you do that, watch what happens. I also want to applaud Net Impact for committing to having a plant-based conference, a plant-based menu for the conference. That's a big deal, really big deal. You know, if we had tried to do that, well, 26 years ago or even 10 years ago, yeah, people would have been like, oh man, I don't know if I can stomach that. That's a little tough. But the world has changed. It really has. The offerings that you're going to have, that you're going to taste today are delicious and diverse and nutritious and fully meeting your dietary needs. And it's really because of companies like Beyond Meat that have changed the whole approach. So what the companies that made veggie burgers used to do was mush a bunch of vegetables together and put it in the shape of a patty and say, well, that's a replacement for a hamburger. And about 5% of the population was vegetarian, and it stayed that way. But at Beyond Meat, we said, let's not do that. Let's understand exactly what meat is. And what we learned, of course, is that all meat comes from plants. The animal meat that we eat is just because it comes to us because an animal uses his or her digestive and skeletal system to convert plants into meat. Well, what if we leave the animal out of it? And we use heat and pressure and cooling. We take those plants and we convert them directly into meat. We know the amino acids form the proteins. We know the lipids form the fats, and 70% water. All of those things exist in the plant kingdom. And when we can do that, we can deliver a product that tastes delicious, but also uses 99% less water, 93% less land. And when you can do that, the sustainability element is transformational. You really can't be at a conference thinking about sustainability and social responsibility and not address what's at the center of the plate. And so that's what we're doing here today, and it's exciting to see the kind of transformation that can take place. We also need your help at Beyond Meat. So we are just in the process now. We have our first trial with McDonald's up in Canada. Anyone in the London, Ontario area or who's in driving distance needs to get to the McDonald's and let them know how good it tastes. We're also in a trial with Subway. We're in Indiana, South Bend, and near Penn State, Harrisburg. If you are in driving range, you need to get to those stores and let them know how good it tastes. We had someone who just drove 347 miles to get to Subway. She loved it. She said it was worth the drive. So if she's doing that, that's something you can do. On November 3rd, Dunkin' Donuts takes the Beyond Breakfast sausage patty chain-wide. And I'm looking for all of you to bring those breakfast sausage patties to your campus and introduce it to your campus. Let them know it's a debriefing meeting from Net Impact, and let them know what happened. Let them know what we ate. I talked about that quote, if we don't change the direction we are headed, we will end up where we're going. Well, it's especially true when we think about our diets. And you can look at the global warming that's happening. You can look at the forests burning in Brazil, and there's a direct connection between that and the meat industry because they're clearing those forests to grow grains that are fed to animals. 60% of the planet's arable land is involved in the meat industry. And of course, when we think about feeding the planet, we don't have enough planets to feed everyone animal-based food. But when you use 93% less land, we do. Not to mention the billions of creatures who are as sentient as the cats and dogs we have in our house, who are victims of our current food system. I remember when my son said to me, Dad, how come if we can meet our nutritional needs without having to kill animals, why wouldn't we try to do that? That was what did it for me. It's a question worth considering, and the change starts today. Thank you all for coming and enjoy the conference.
What y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe so clear. Look out. Pop, pop is so
Good morning. My name is Sarah Soderstrom. I'm a faculty member at the University of Michigan in Organizational Studies and Program in the Environment. Yes, go blue, right? I was thinking back actually around both the Herb Institute, which is at University of Michigan. We've been around for 23 years now, working to build change agents, very similar to Net Impact, and thinking about my own path in both organizations that has now spread almost 20 years. And it is so wonderful to be here today in Detroit with this amazing audience, thinking about the space of change. Within the Herb Institute, we've historically focused on that at the graduate student level, but what has been amazing in the past few years is seeing the growth of undergraduate programming, and we've been thrilled just recently to announce the launch of a new undergraduate programming around business and sustainability that Michigan is starting in this fall. Within the Herb Institute, we work directly with change agents. And one of the things that I think is so inspiring is we focus on how do we build and develop change agents around business and sustainability, is really centering on this focus of how does business do good and what skills do we need to see that space. I've been lucky the past few years to be able to work with the Environmental Defense Fund and the Herb Institute to really study and think about what differentiates people who are in these change agent roles and really able to make impact. And there are a number of things that stand up and emerge. Many of that comes into our ability to learn, to apply, and to build excitement and focus and understanding of the work that we're doing. And we see that come through our networks within organizations and how we build change, but also externally. And I wanted to just take a minute to encourage all of you to take advantage of the time that you have here at the conference, home with your Net Impact chapters, to recognize the value of the connectivity that you have. Not only in those times of good, when things are going well, when you're seeing change, when you feel like you're making an impact, but also what we see maybe more often than we'd like, but those times of burnout, of frustration, of feeling like you're hitting a wall. And that's where the work has shown the networks like Net Impact, the networks like your school programs, people who you meet at conferences like this, are your recharge. Right? Know them, find them, hold on to them, because it's at those times when we most need all of our change agents to kind of step back, recharge, and get back into the game. For me, I have maybe a time too often found my recharge being a Ben & Jerry's New York Super Fudge chunk. So outside of my 20-year relationship with that as well, I have found networks across programs like Net Impact significant in that space. I've also been thrilled to be able to meet and work with so many students whose careers I've been able to follow and look to for inspiration. So we're all looking to you. And I am honored today to be here today to introduce one of the people whose story has been that type of inspiration for me. Veronica Scott is the founder and CEO of the Empowerment Plan, which is a Detroit-based social enterprise that started with kind of the design technological problem, right? How do we design a self-heated, waterproof coat that transforms into a sleeping bag for homeless people? Right? In and of itself, that's the design challenge. Where do we bring our innovation, our space, our problem solving to that issue? But then even further, how do we do that in a way that itself has impact? And what I find so inspiring with Veronica's story is the combination of the product with the process, and how she launched this program to transform a system of empowerment that creates jobs to permanently lift people out of poverty. She has been recognized for this more ways than I can even note, but to note some of the big ones, she is the youngest recipient of the JFK New Frontier Award. She received an honorary doctorate from Johnson State College. She's the winner of the IDEA Gold Award, the Diane Van Furstenberg People's Voice Award, been named on the Forbes 30 Under 30. The list goes on and on. Her organization's story has been told internationally at the World Summit on Innovation, the Forbes 400 Philanthropy Summit, and I'm thrilled that she is here today to share her story with you. I know that she's one of those people I will continue to look back to, and I look forward to seeing not just what she's done so far, but where she goes next. And I would like to welcome Veronica Scott. Thank you.
All right, hello. Thanks for having me. So I just have to say a small little joke before we get started, because my team was really excited that I was going to have walk-on music. So we didn't get it today, unfortunately, but they hacked into my email account and responded that I wanted to walk on to Katy Perry's Roar. So I'm really sad that that didn't happen, but we're going to have to pretend for them that it did. They were very proud. They're like, look at what we did. We finally got her. And that I'm a closeted Katy Perry fan. So really, to get into the work that we've done at Empowerment Plan, really started off as a class project in college. So I was going to College for Creative Studies here in Detroit. It is wild to think that we've grown into what you see on the screen now. But really, it was around a product design class that is about designing to fill a need in the community. And this was in 2010, and a lot was happening in Detroit at that time. And of course, like any good design students, we didn't really know how to do design research yet, so we relied heavily on Google. And the first thing that we did was just Google Detroit needs and came up with a laundry list of things at the time, and most of them deep systemic issues, public transportation, public housing, education, all of these things that we felt like we couldn't tackle in a semester's class. And I remember what we did next was actually finally leave the computers behind and go talk to actual human beings. And when we did that, we heard stories from adults, from kids, everyone across the board about how in winter, as you're on your way to work or as you're on the way to school, you see this person that's outside in the worst weather and you want to do something to help, but you have no idea what's actually going to have an impact. And everyone felt that same internal conflict. Everyone, not just here in Detroit, but I've heard it in the years since across the globe. And it was amazing that that was the response, and that because no one knew what to do, they didn't do anything at all. And so what we did was then, all right, we're gonna find a shelter and we're gonna talk to people. So we Googled Detroit shelters and go to the first one that shows up in the search history, because we're very talented researchers, and we go. And I remember this is the NSO Tsunami Center. It's a one-story, windowless building. It was surrounded by barbed wire at the time. It was an intimidating place. And really, they only had about 150 chairs in this building. And you could sit there for 8 hours. Everything you owned must fit on your lap or underneath your chair, otherwise it was thrown out. And you get to sit there and stay, eat some food. Most people had spent years of their life sleeping in those chairs and couldn't sleep laying down. And basically stay there before the next group rotated in. Every street outreach group, every soup kitchen, all these organizations have street names, and that does not come up in Google. So when you pull up NSO and Tsunami Center, it's just a warming center, but on the streets, it's known as just hell. Didn't realize that, didn't come up in Google. And the reason that was because people were looking at this as like the last stop. This was, if you had been released from prison the night before, if you had nowhere else to go, you didn't have to be clean, you didn't have to be sober. This place was there for you, but it was also very rough and potentially dangerous. And so, of course, we show up with all of our design research crap, like sticky notes and Sharpies and horribly written questionnaires that were really gonna get the heart of the problem. And we had read like some design research book at one point and thought sticky notes were the only way to design products and that process. So we show up, you go through 2 metal detectors and a pat down before you go into the building. And we get to meet with the manager and saying, hey, we're really excited, we're design students, we wanna come in and we wanna help people and we're gonna come up with this new product thing. He's like, great. So you wanna come in, you wanna do some volunteer work, be my guest. Shift changes over at 8 p.m., bring whatever you want, you can talk to some people, sounds adorable. Next day, I show up again with my giant tote bag of crap, and I'm ready to go. I get through the 2 metal detectors, the pat down, there's people sitting in chairs, watching, I remember vividly Cheers on a big television, and I'm waiting. It's 8 p.m., no one else shows up. None of the other classmates that I had gone to do like the scouting for this place with, waiting some more. Still no one shows. By this point, the night manager, whose name was Mr. Spratt, who had his arm in a sling from the fight from the night before, and he was wearing a linebacker jersey, was like, you ready? Like, are you gonna do this or what? It's like, okay, sure, I'll talk to some people. He pushes me out in front of the crowd, looks at me, says, good luck, you're gonna need it, clicks off the television and walks away. Then everyone just stands up and starts swearing at me. It takes him 10 minutes to calm everyone down, and I get it, I ruined the evening, I turned off Cheers, I understand. And basically, after everyone, sat down, all I could verbally vomit out was, I'm broke, I live with my grandparents, and I need your help to pass a class, which is super inspiring and really gets people wanting to engage with you on a deep level. The response was, a woman came up to me after, is like, you wanna help us turn our fucking television back on? I was like, got it, I'm gonna go melt into the wall over there. I'll see you later. I gave away all the disposable cameras I had. I got 2 back 6 months later, and that was how the empowerment plan began. It's a beautiful, warm story, but I think at the end of the day, that initial engagement of just, look, I need your help. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I want to work with you on this. That's what started it. So I went every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night at 8 p.m. I rotated through every friend and family member I had, because they would only go once, and worked there and spent time there for about 6 months designing the coat. And the coat was really inspired by 2 things. It was inspired by a playground that had been turned into a makeshift home for someone 20 feet away from this shelter. It was across the street. It had been covered in tarps and clothes, and 2 people were living inside of it. And I remember going through, walking around the neighborhood one of the days that I was there, and I come back a week later, and it was burned to the ground in a turf war. It literally had been torn apart and melted and destroyed. And the 2 people survived the incident, only to pass away, I think about 6 to 9 months later, because they had been out in the elements for so long. And the biggest question that I had from that was like, one, why would you build yourself something that someone is trying to give you for free 20 feet away? It's not as if you don't have access. It's not as if you don't know it's there. It's 20 feet away from you. And you end up paying the ultimate price to do so. And really, it comes down to something we don't talk about when we talk about charity, which is pride, which is the need and want to take care of yourself, this dignity and respect. And the best example I've seen is the reason why we're all after wanting to take care of ourselves and after pride and dignity is how people treat others that are in the shelter. Have you ever seen a sandwich drive-by by show of hands? I'm really glad that no one raised their hand. That's great. When I was at NSO, this happened more than once, otherwise I wouldn't believe it could happen. So a group was charged with handing out food. So they packed the van full of sandwiches, and normally you get out, you set up a table, and you pass out food that way. You interact with people, but instead, this group was so afraid of the population of NSO that what they did was they slowly drove up to this building, slowed down to a crawl, rolled down all the windows, and started tossing sandwiches out the window at people. And in my mind, when you think about that, like, did they, at the end of their route, pat themselves on the back and say, good job? People were hungry, and we fed them. And when you look at giving back and social impact as a math equation, you end up with something like that, where you end up treating people, humans, like feral zoo animals. And that's why people want to go out and they want to create this home for themselves. And really, that was the hardest part of making my class project into an actual product. You know, I spent 80 hours making the first prototype. I had to learn how to sew from my mother, but it was all meant to give this opportunity. If you couldn't get into a shelter, that you weren't going to lose limbs, that you weren't going to lose feet or fingers to frostbite, that if there wasn't room for you, that you still have something. And the first couple prototypes were extremely rough. The first one weighed 23 pounds because it was using all recycled content. It had 20 different little broken needles inside of it because I was doing it on a home sewing machine. It was just a health hazard. And I kept on going back with prototype after prototype after prototype. I ended up with a street name that I still have to this day in that neighborhood, if you want to wander around and ask, which is the Crazy Coat Girl, or just the Coat Lady for short. And people would direct you to a set empowerment plan. But those coats, people were coming up to me and asking for the product. They were saying, so when are we going to get this jacket? When are we, like, strangers on the street were coming up to me like, I hear you're the coat lady. When are these coats going to happen? I was like, do you know how long it takes me to make one? It takes me 2 weeks to make one. There's like only 10 that I can make this year. And that response, though, was so powerful. I remember going back to the shelter, and as I was leaving with the most recent prototype, a woman started screaming at me, full on yelling, saying, I don't need a coat, I need a job. What you're doing is pointless. And in reality, the coat is just a Band-Aid for a systemic issue. And what really has the impact is hiring the people that would need it in the first place. And for me, it's personal. Both my parents and I grew up in a situation of homelessness and poverty and drug addiction, where we were constantly being evicted and moving around. And I know what it's like to be treated as if you're worthless or worthless by default because you're in a situation of homelessness and poverty, and how damaging that can be. And really, Empowerment Plan is an opportunity I wish that had been given to my own family. And in doing so, we started off with the coat. That is how we began, and that's what we're known for, but we're so much more than that. And I think that's what's the thing that gets me really excited, is that when people come to work at Empowerment Plan, they're only spending about 60% of their time on production. The rest is dedicated to GED classes, professionalism leadership development, domestic violence support, mindfulness and meditation. We have a clinical therapist on staff, case managers. So you're getting paid to get your GED. You're getting paid to get your driver's license. Because they've shown, even in Chicago, for example, it takes one single woman to get out of poverty, going to over 70 different organizations. We have a very broken system that sends people all over the place. And instead of working as an ecosystem and understanding that we need to be a continuum of care, we ping pong people around, moving the responsibility from place to place to place, where, we'll take care of this part of it, but you need to go over there to address that. And people get lost. And understandably so, I can't even think of 72 different organizations that I would go to. And so what we look at ourselves really as an organization is we address the entire person when they walk in the door. We look at everything holistically. You can't maintain a job if you have no transportation, if you have no childcare, and if you don't have a roof over your head. So those are the three things that we focus the minute they get in the door. That's the first 90 days. And after that, they're with us for about 2 years before going on into other jobs. And I mean other jobs like home health care, welding, a lot in the actually mortgage banking field, which is really interesting as well. But to see that journey into middle skill, middle income takes time. So we immediately pay people, and they're getting paid to work on all of these things and spend time getting mental health support, buying a home, getting a car. Those are the really exciting things that we get to see. And because of that, over the last almost 7 years now, since this was a class project till now, we've actually distributed 40,000 codes now thanks. Across the entire US, all of Canada, and now 17 other countries. Disaster relief, refugee camps. We have been able to reach so many people around the world. At the same time, we've hired over 80 individuals, and each person has about 3.5 kids on average. And every single person we've ever hired moves out of the shelter within the first 4 to 6 weeks of working with us. And not a single person has ever, since we began, fallen back into homelessness once we've hired them. And that's the thing that we're the most proud of. But that just really goes to show you that these small ideas, I have no experience in entrepreneurship. I had no business background. I went to art school. I have no experience in sewing before I started this. But the smallest ideas, in a crazy way, can lead to something like this. And I wouldn't have expected this in a million years. So thank you for having me.
What y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe so clear. Look out! Pop, it's showtime. Showtime. Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. I'm wearing Cuban links, designer mix, Inglewood's finest shoes. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Known to get the color red, the blue.
Hi, this is a really big room. My name's Megan Shea. I have the privilege of introducing you to a few members of the Net Impact community this morning who I know you have so much in common with. They participated exceptionally well in some of the programs that Net Impact Central ran last year. And what they did was they participated in programs and they used them as opportunities to really accelerate an idea. that they had that could solve something that we often call wicked problems. They're problems that are so big that they can almost immobilize a person from thinking that they're too huge to be able to really make action on. So those problems like climate change and food insecurity, they found opportunities with net impact to address those in their own communities. And the most remarkable thing about what they've accomplished is that as a result of this work, they are now responsible for projects that are making a change already in the places where they live. In the process, they also sharpened their skills as innovators. They met a lot of new people who can help them along the way in their journeys. And they developed these projects, which I'm so excited to tell you about. So enough from me. Let's meet Ryan, Martin, Respect, and Cedric. So first, meet Ryan. A New Zealand native, Ryan is currently earning a master's in sustainable management from DePaul University. So Ryan and his colleague Martin decide to submit a solution to the 2019 Food Solutions Challenge. We've run this program every year recently. It's always about the intersection of food production and climate change. These two things impact each other in really huge and transformational ways. And last year's challenge was about specifically focusing on how sustainable refrigeration could make a big difference on food access in sub-Saharan Africa. So Ryan and Martin's solution is an app that would enable farmers in Kenya to, instead of harvesting their food and letting it sit, it would be immediately picked up by refrigerated transportation, taken to a market or to a warehouse. So this really changes the amount of edible food that reaches people and the amount that farmers get to earn on that produce. So creating projects like this is exactly what brought Ryan to pursue his degree at DePaul. He moved halfway around the world, sunk all of his life savings to develop these skills. And so he's taking what he learns at school and he's honing those skills and he's practicing on real-world projects like this. And that's the kind of experience most people don't get until they've already landed that amazing sustainability job somehow after they graduate. Now I'd like to give you a better sense of Ryan's teammate, Martin. Like Ryan, Martin moved a really long way from his native Austria to get a master's in sustainable management. And his biggest concern is about climate change. So everything that he's doing is about providing skills that, it's about getting people and companies to take action immediately to do what we can to stop and reverse climate change. So the key skill that Martin has is the ability to influence people, and that's exactly what he brought to his project. So being a part of Net Impact is a natural fit. I'm really delighted to introduce you to Respect. Respect was born in an agricultural village in Zimbabwe to parents who worked as farmers until they died at a young age. Because he grew up in a community where farmers worked hard, but poverty and food insecurity were common, these themes drive everything that he does. To Respect, agricultural resilience is about livelihoods. Agriculture was the main source of food and income for him growing up. So you can imagine that when perishable food goes bad, it exacerbates income problems and insufficient nourishment. So Respect's vision is simple: to bring climate-smart technology to rural farmers, which will increase their resilience to threats posed by climate change and to poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. So to tackle this big goal, Respect has done a ton of work. He earned a MasterCard scholarship to attend Earth University in Costa Rica, where he's the founding member of the Net Impact chapter. 2 years ago, he was a finalist in the Net Impact Drawdown Challenge. If you don't know Climate Drawdown, it's a series of scientifically grounded solutions that can actually reverse the effects of climate change. So he learned about how to apply those in his own community. And what he did was he submitted an idea to use solar dehydrators and place them in communities where farmers live in rural Zimbabwe. So he won funding as associated with that program. He invested that funding in his project, And that project called Vintage Foods is now operating. So, yeah. But he's not done. So the next year, Respect placed third in the Food Solutions Challenge. And through that program, he decided he wanted to go further. He wanted to have refrigeration accessible to farmers as well. So I'm proud to say that Vintage Foods is now working with over 150 smallholder farmers to reduce wasted crops, improve farmers' livelihoods, and increase available fresh food. And he's just getting started. So he placed in a program in 2017, another one last year. He's now won additional funding to support Vintage Foods. He's been selected as a climate fellow with Cornell University. And Respect's ultimate vision is that in 10 years after its founding, Vintage Foods will be a self-sustaining business that serves the whole region where he was raised in Zimbabwe. So last but not least, I want to introduce you to Cedric. Cedric is a net impact superstar. As an undergrad at Texas State University, he's taken advantage of so many opportunities and has just racked up a pile of sustainability accolades, including being a Forbes Under 30 Fellow and a Green Biz Emerging Leader. So recently, I forgot one thing here. Recently at Adidas, he led a team to work on an employee clothing swap that is now moving to scale at Adidas retail locations. So this enabled Adidas to take responsibility for the products they produce and to have honest feedback with their customers about what they should be doing to move forward in terms of sustainability. Last year, Cedric and his Texas State team accomplished something really special. Their team won a pitch-off for a net impact program to bring an idea, to bring innovation to a local food bank. They developed an app to improve food recovery in this food bank, and you can see a picture of the app up there. After about 4 months of working with Microsoft employees, Cedric's team actually handed over the app to the food bank. So of the $5,000 they won from the pitch-off to launch their pilot, every dollar spent in that local community delivered $17 in total collective impact. So it's a lot to accomplish in your junior year of college. I'd be sure. I'd be remiss to get off the stage and act like that's the end of the story. So I hope you'll make the time to talk to these 4 individuals and learn more about them, because I think they share so much in common with many of us in the room. And the programs that helped enable them are currently running again. And I hope that you accept the challenge and apply to them. And I hope that we're leading you onto the keynote stage a year from now to accept a big round of applause.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jillian Cobb.
And my name is Jennifer Majorana.
And we are the co-presidents of the undergraduate chapter at the University of Michigan.
Go Blue.
Next, we are so honored to be bringing up 2 amazing people for a conversation about innovations in affordable, accessible, and high-quality education in the United States. First is Romy Drucker, Deputy Director for the K-12 Education Program at the Walton Family Foundation. Romy's impressive history as a champion for education includes serving as Special Assistant to Joel Klein, Chancellor of the New York City Department of Education, and as Deputy to the CEO of the Fund for Public Schools, which has raised several $100 million for innovative educational programs serving New York City's 1.1 million students. She worked with the New York City Department of Education on Mayor Bloomberg and Chancellor Klein's transformational Children First reforms, and most recently was the co-founder and CEO of the 74, an award-winning nonprofit news organization focused on education. Romy graduated cum laude from Yale College and holds an MBA from Harvard Business School.
Joining Romy is Anand K7, a Detroit native. He is also founder and CEO of the Equitable Faculties Fund, a nonprofit loan dedicated to providing long-term, affordable facility financing to high-performing charter schools. Founded in 2017 and modeled after revolving loan fund structures from other sectors, the Equitable Facilities Fund has combined philanthropy with debt issued on the bond market to originate over $160 million in low-cost loans to 42 schools that serve 20,000 students across the country. Anand has served in leadership roles across the financial, education, and philanthropy sectors. He previously led the Charter School Growth Fund's structured finance team, was CFO for KIPP Austin Public Schools, and worked in public finance investment banking for over a decade. He's a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, go Blue, and is a long-suffering Lions fan as well. We are so excited to hear what Romy and Anand have to say today. Thank you both for joining us.
The whole effort that we as a family have made on the education front has to do with hope and with the belief that people first should have the opportunity for a good education. So many of these children that we work with, the places where they live do not have good alternatives. So it really is up to the charter school movement. So the whole goal of this was to use some of the structures that have successfully worked for water projects and affordable housing in order to pull down the cost for the individual schools. So it literally puts millions of dollars into each school each year. It allows those operators to focus on their real business, which is not financing schools, but to focus on building great students and great systems and great teachers. We have the opportunity, because of this first success, to draw many, many investors. Just in my life, I think this is one of the most exciting projects that I've ever had the good fortune to be involved in, with one of the best outcomes.
Good morning, everyone. You just met Alice Walton, a visionary philanthropist who for more than 3 decades has been leading the Walton Family Foundation's work to ensure that every child has access to a great school and the American dream. Today we're here to talk about one of the most transformative investments of her lifetime, the Equitable Facilities Fund. With $200 million from Jim and Alice Walton, the fund just closed a $112 million bond issue to help thousands of children get access to great schools and great school buildings. We're going to spend the next couple minutes talking about how it happened and where we go from here. I'm super excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Anand Kesavan, CEO of the Equitable Facilities Fund. Anand, tell us a little bit about what brought you to this incredible work.
Thanks, Romy. I get to tell the origin story. My favorite story. I get to tell 15 years of origin in about 5 minutes. Let me start by saying I'm humbled to be here. I'm humbled to be representing Alice and Jim Walton. I'm humbled to be granted $200 million to do so and represent the Walton Family Foundation, but most of all, to be here in front of the future of impact investing, the future of social impact, and part of my origin, which is net impact. So the career story is interesting. People often think of careers as a straight line, and I came from the investment banking world where it often is, or perhaps a ladder. Steve Jobs describes it as connecting the dots. The social impact world is a little different to me, and I have my own framework for my origin story and for a lot of social impact students. And I call it the heart and triangle framework. In essence, you have to know why you do the work, and that's the heart. You have to really know it, you have to be able to tell it, and you have to really believe it yourself. But that's not enough. We need to bolster it with what I call the triangle, and the triangle is a combination of 3 things, which I'll get into in the origin story, is one, building the skills, the raw product skills. Two, it's bolstering those skills with sector expertise. And then three, which is the base of the triangle and why we're all here today, is building the network to make it happen. And that's how eventually this all came together. So let me start with that heart. And what I said about the heart was you have to be really clear why you do it. I do this because. I do this because. Look in the mirror as if no one's in front of you, which isn't the case right now, and be able to say, I do this because. Like, I do this because I believe every child, regardless of demographics, deserves to define their own destiny with equal and equitable access to capital markets. I practiced that a lot for like 10 years, all right? And one day...
It's good. Keep it in the act.
One day it came in handy when I least expected it. And that one day was when I got a phone call from a gentleman who said, I hear you have an idea. I've been working on this idea for 5 years, so, and before it ever got anywhere, and you'll hear more about that later. But when I finally met with this gentleman, he didn't ask about the idea. He asked me, why do I want to do this? And there was no hesitation there. And if I didn't have that down, if I didn't have I believe in this, I do this because I believe, I wouldn't even got a second meeting. And people ask me, well, where did that all come from? Where did this belief come from? And it all started here. I'm from the area. My mother, who's in the audience right here, was a 8th grade English teacher at Beaubien Junior High School right down the street. And it was early in my life, I was able to see the inequities and the inequalities in the classroom. And it didn't sit well with me even back then. Took me further in my career over internationally to India and Guatemala, where I helped start schools. And finally over to Austin, Texas, where we started 10 schools for predominantly low-income, predominantly immigrant children on the east side of Austin. And the way things worked just were not fair. The one commonality behind all of this in my journey was that the capital access was not equal. This is hundreds of years of capital markets being broken and not serving those who need it most. And I know why so many of you are here is to build that network, to build that capital for the ideas you're working on. And that's why we started the Equitable Facilities Fund. And that's where my heart came from. That's why I do this work. But that wouldn't have been enough, because that would have got me through the first meeting or maybe the introduction. But this is where the triangle comes in. And this triangle took me 15 years to build in my career. I spent over a decade as an investment banker. And the product that we have is very unique to what we do now, but it's not unique in other markets. It's exactly what I did for a living for over a decade, except those markets were efficient. Those markets weren't predominantly serving low-income students. And I simply brought that product expertise, which I built over a decade, into a sector that needed it. And that got me the credibility to do so.
So one of the things I know from listening to you and learning from you is you are very clear on the problem statement that the Equitable Facilities Fund is dedicated to solving. I want to take just a step back. Educational equity and the fight for education justice, there's a lot of different stakeholders. Just explain for us a little bit how public charter schools normally would try to access facilities and capital resources for facilities so that we understand how the Equitable Facilities Fund is making an impact for those schools.
Sure. So let's define that. This whole session is about solving problems. So let's define this problem. Let me give you a story. Suppose we had this half of the audience and this half of the audience. And this half of the audience, I say, hey, listen, let's go start a school in this neighborhood. Really difficult neighborhood. You guys are the experts. Let's go start it. Go to this half of the audience and say, same thing. You guys are the experts. Let's go to a neighborhood that really needs it, and let's start a school. But with one difference. This half of the audience gets a building, a $20 million beautiful building to do it in. This half of the audience just gets a $100,000 grant, and you're on your own. How does that sound? Doesn't sound very fair, does it? It's not, and it's not. And it's not because the capital markets for this side are broken. Nobody wants to lend $20 million, especially into communities that have been historically underserved. And that's a market failure, a market problem that we are trying to solve. So what does this side of the audience do? I see Kyle Smitley back here in the audience, a CEO and founder of Detroit Prep. And she's been battling with this problem for several years now. We have a hodgepodge of solutions. We use patchwork. We spend a lot of time, but time and money that comes out of the classroom. And we use portables. We take short-term loans. We try to raise philanthropy from local funders. It's a hodgepodge of things that ends up taking money out of the classroom, time out of the classroom, and results in facilities that aren't as good, and that's just not fair.
Totally, no. I mean, that really resonates with me. I am on the board of a charter school in Brownsville, Brooklyn, in New York, which is a neighborhood in great need. Our school specializes in serving students who are homeless and students in transitional housing. And the time that the facilities search has taken away from our visionary school leader, it's just been hard to watch. So you had an idea for how to make this product attractive to investors, how to bring capital to these neighborhoods, and to create, high quality school buildings, which we should say are essential for kids to be able to learn. You can't learn if you're not comfortable, if you don't feel safe in your school. So how did you think about how to sort of package all of this together in a way that made it interesting for investors and attractive?
Yeah. Someone challenged me one day at a conference. I was always talking about the need for this, and someone challenged me and said, suppose somebody were to give you $1 billion, what would you do? And it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? Because I'm like, who's going to give us $1 billion? And I wrote an idea. I wrote a white paper. It was a conference just like this. I was sitting on a panel. Somebody came up to me afterwards, and I wrote a white paper that same night. And the idea was to borrow a tactic that's worked in the capital markets for clean water. In the 1980s, the EPA did a bunch of grants to states to clean up the rivers and drinking water. And I said, well, if somebody gave me $1 billion, I wouldn't necessarily go partition that to a bunch of schools. I would create a corpus that was scalable, that was multiplicative, that would build a credit, that could eventually do $5 billion or $10 billion in loans to basically create that entire capital market for schools. And the essence of this is everybody has to be a winner in that, right? In this case, the EPA was a winner, clean water was a winner, the states were winners. In our case, whoever funded it had to be a winner, whoever invested in it on top of that had to win, and the schools had to win. And eventually the students and the communities had to win. And that's how we designed it, by borrowing a successful tactic from another industry and placing it into the industry that we cared about.
So now that you've done this successful raise, $112 million, what is next for you? You're now running a fund, you have a team of people. What's next?
Doing more. This is a big market. We've done $160 million in loans to schools and raised $110 million from investors, along with $200 million in philanthropy. And that's just the beginning, all right? We've served 20,000 students. There's more than 50 million students in this country, almost 4 million of them in charter schools. So that's just a drop in the bucket. We've placed $160 million in loans. There's more than $30 billion in need. So we need to scale. That's the first thing. We're going to get bigger. Two, we're going to multiply the investment. We're going to find investors to match the money that we're getting from our equity, our capitalization grant funders. And three, we're going to sustain. We're going to build a model that sustains forever. This fund is going to be here 100 years from now because we're building it in a way that sustains forever to eventually help more than 1 million students.
Can you tell us a brief anecdote about a school that has benefited from the fund, just so we sort of have a sense of how this investment vehicle is having an on-the-ground impact?
Absolutely. I'll tell you a story about our very first loan, Soulsville Charter School in Memphis, Tennessee. This is a school in a very difficult neighborhood in Memphis, similar to Detroit in some ways, has been left behind by the capital markets and certainly by the school system. And we were able to give them a $10 million loan, which over time has saved them more than $4 million. And that $4 million goes directly back into the classroom. And I met with their principal last week in Memphis, and she described to me they've hired reading interventionists, they've hired paras, they've hired 2 additional sped teachers. And these are the people, the teachers on the ground, are the ones who are pushing forward the education in this country. And we need to get more of our money into the classroom to help the teachers, to help the students, and less to go towards paying the banks.
Amen to that. So, last question. A lot of aspiring social entrepreneurs in the room who have a vision for change and are passionate about a range of social justice issues. Hopefully some of you are super passionate about education. Come talk to us after. What is your advice? What is your advice? You had this unique experience of having Jim and Alice make a gift of what is really catalytic capital. They had a vision for change. They saw in you an entrepreneur with a big idea who could really change and reshape a market to better work for the neediest students. You've learned a lot from this experience, but just in closing, what advice do you have for folks in the audience?
I'd say 3 things. Three P's, actually. First, and you said big, bold solutions, push the envelope. When someone asked me what would I do, I didn't build a $1 million fund. I proposed a $1 billion fund. Most people laughed at me, I'll tell you the truth. I didn't get funded for 5 years. But you gotta think big. These are big challenges and they require bold solutions, and I proposed a bold one. So push the envelope and keep pushing it. And the second P actually goes hand in hand with that. It's a parallel track it. And it's easy for me to say that I pushed the envelope and scored big with a $1 billion fund, but I was hedging on the back end. I parallel tracked it, so I built my triangle stronger. Right? I didn't have all 3 parts of the triangle when I first wrote the idea, so I said, why isn't anybody funding me? So I took a 3rd job at a big philanthropy, the largest charter school philanthropy in the country. And that's where I built the network, that strong base that helped propel my finance and my charter school experience, right, with the heart in the middle. If I didn't do that, and when I parallel tracked it, I negotiated what's called Google time with the fund I worked with. I got to spend 20% of my time on a pet project. And I already had the pet project, 1 day a week, which is where I spent all on this idea for more than 2 years, trying to, speaking at conferences, trying to raise money. I must have met with 150 people before I finally got the phone call from Mr. and Miss Walton.
Well, I just want to thank Anand for his incredible work. All of you, we need energy and ideas to close the achievement gap and increase equity for students. Thank you for talking today, and we look forward to talking with some of you later.
Y'all trying to do 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe, so clear. Look out. Pop, it's showtime. Guess who's back again?
Hi everyone, my name is Rina Strijdom. I'm a grad student for Design for Sustainability at Savannah School of Art and Design. My focus is working on post-consumer waste in the fashion industry, and I had the opportunity to participate in the Wear It Wise Challenge, which I'm very happy to say we won. To Today, I've got the honor to introduce Jessica Norwood. Jessica has been recognized by the Essence magazine as 50 entrepreneurs to watch. She's a financial activist, investment and social entrepreneur. She's widely known for her groundbreaking work in the economic disruption and deploys strategies in the areas of capital, policy, and leadership development to transform the system that prohibits communities from thriving in an increasingly harsh economic climate. As a leading social entrepreneur in native Alabama, Jessica is for investing as a strategy of building community resilience. Identifying the need for a springboard, in 2012, she established the Emerging Changemaker Network. This is an initiative targeted to disenfranchised communities within the Deep South, providing a user-friendly business development toolbox that allows individuals to actively invest in their communities. Jessica is also the founder of Runway Projects, a suite of strategies that increase investment capital, particularly early capital known as Friends and Family Round, into African American companies nationwide. If that's not impressive enough, Jessica is part of the fellowship for RSF Social Financial Integrated Capital Fellowship, a Nathan Cummings Foundation Fellow, a former Bell Fellow for Local Economies, a lifelong Fellow for Stanford School of Public Policies at Duke University and Southern University College of Business for Emerging Leaders, as well as a Political Power and Social Change Fellowship for the Hip Hop Archives at the Hunchkin Center at Harvard University. It is my honor today to introduce to you Jessica Norwood.
Wow. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm going to sit today because I like to do a thing where I tell you a little story. How about that? So first, I just want to thank Net Impact for making this opportunity available and this stage. And I want to thank all of you for giving of your time this morning. Again, my name is Jessica Norwood, and I am the founder of the Runway Project. So when I was getting myself ready to come and talk with you, I asked the team at Net Impact to tell me a little bit more about who's going to be in the room. And they said folks who are going into business, social enterprise, marketing, finance. And I thought, my goodness, what could I say that would be impactful as you are going into your life's work? And here is where I landed. A couple of months ago, in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama, 2 National Geographic divers came to Mobile Bay, and they searched the muddy waters of the bay using the latest technology. They were able to find, noticing the size, the type of wood, and residue burn marks, a particular boat, a cargo boat called Clotilda. Clotilda had been used years ago to bring 110 Africans into Mobile Bay. Now, at the time, this was 1860, and the practice of going to the continent to enslave people had been outlawed, but the practice of keeping enslaved people was still very much alive. And 2 men, names that are well on buildings and names we know today in our community, the Mayer family, they made a bet. And the bet was pretty simple. I bet we can go and enslave some Africans. And so they took the Clotilda out of the port of Mobile and sailed it to what is present-day Benin and took 110 people. The captain, coming back into Mobile Bay, fearing discovery, unloaded the people and then set the boat on fire, sinking it into Mobile Bay. Nobody had talked about it. We grew up knowing about this, but nobody talked about it until May 18th, when headlines read, "The last slave ship to ever enter America has been found." So I grew up 3 miles away from this area, and I grew up knowing that I was a descendant of this community. And I can't tell you exactly what it brings up for me just yet. It's still living, it's still very alive, it's still very present. But what I can tell you is that it is making it so much so that every conversation I want to have has to do with repair. And repair means exactly what I mean: to fix what has been broken. Repair the planet, and to repair the people. Now, okay, the funny thing about me being here is that actually my Buddhist teacher told me to come. And she Nirali never says anything like this. And so when I got the invitation, I was thinking, okay, what kind of like transformative thing is gonna happen for me being here? And what can I offer to you? And this question about repair kept needling at me. It kept coming up. And in true sort of Buddhist practice idea, I thought about, well, how do you practice repair, right? And so I want to give you a little definition for practice. I would say that it means that we have to have an agreement around a basic set of ideas. And then we have to actively work, make active those particular ideas, to cultivate a practice. Be active in those ideas so that the vision, the spirit of those ideas live, embody. So that would be what a practice would be. So to practice repair, you and I would have to have some agreements. We'd have to agree right here, right now, that enslavement of any kind, whether through jail or because of social condition, is morally wrong. We'd have to agree right now that othering another person is not acceptable in our culture, and we'd have to agree right now that we are directly linked to one another and to the planet around us. These are the agreements that we'd have to make in order to practice repair. I think it's important to think about this practice of repair for the 110 people on the Clotilda, and not just for them, but for all of us, because we are the inheritors of a legacy right now of trauma, of violence and abuse because of it. We live right now in the shadows of statues, plantations, and inside of laws that were meant to hold up a very racist structure in society. And I will tell you, by looking at you, we are not those people, and it's time we act like it. What I'm suggesting here to you is what it means to have an embodied practice of repair, one that centers on respect, relationship, and risk-taking. Respect, because the uniqueness of all of us is actually our best asset. Relationship, because we've got to move beyond this place where everything is transactional. It's got to be deeper relationship. And risk-taking, because there is no way for all of us to get to the return, to the reward that we say we want. A better world, a healthier planet, healthier people. We can't get to it without being willing to take the risk to move into the unknown with one another. I like to think of the work that I do at the Runway Project as my own embodied practice of repair. As the founder of the Runway Project, we make friends and family loans to African American entrepreneurs and other people of color. And the thing about friends and family loans, and you know, you've heard this term before, where you've got a really great idea and everybody says, oh, that's fantastic. You should borrow money from your friends and your family. And then I look around at my friends and my family and I'm like, what money? What friends? What family? And that's because wealth in the United States falls very clearly along racial lines. We call that term the wealth gap, but it's much, much more than just that. Right now, African American wealth is right around $10,000 and slipping, compared to white wealth, which is around $145,000, and it is growing. So we step in and we become that aunt or that uncle, that friend, that family, because your social network wouldn't be able to provide that early kind of money. And it makes a big deal. It means that ideas that would normally stay on the napkin might get a chance to come off that napkin now and be out in the world. We also get to do something really different. We get to challenge these ideas about who we should take a risk on, who we should believe, who do we think actually has the right to be impactful in our communities. We bet on each other because we believe in each other. And so, it seems as if I have all of those things already figured out. But I will tell you that I did not always have it figured out. I say these terms, racial wealth gap, and if I'm honest with you, it doesn't really capture what I mean. What I mean is around repair for people like Mr. Robert. So Mr. Robert is one of the first people that I ever tried to make a loan to. Operative word, tried to make the loan. And I was in Alabama, and I had gotten some research dollars from the Ford Foundation, and I was looking at how do we put money, particularly into African American farmers whose land was being lost at rapid rates. And we thought maybe if we could put the land into better usage, if we could get them capital, this will stop some of this, but what kind of capital where? So I brought together a group of farmers. And one of those farmers was Mr. Roberts. At that time, he was about 80 years old. And he rarely talked, as a small, compact guy, strong. And nobody was taking these loans. And I thought that I had done a good job of talking and interviewing and really shaping the underwriting criteria and everything, and it just was not happening. And so I brought everybody back together, and I was like, okay, explain it to me. What's going on? And he began to speak, and he told me about growing up in Alabama in the Black Belt and being a sharecropper. And that when the owner of the land that he was on passed away, he thought, okay, I can work this land and I'll be able to maybe make some payments, and so maybe I can just get a parcel of this land. So he talked to the children of this owner, and the children had since moved to Atlanta and to Birmingham, and they said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Go over to the neighboring county and set something up with our banker, and it should work out just fine. And so he set something up, and for 15 years or so, he's making payments, and he didn't have a formal education. He kept a little ledger himself, and after about 15 years, he went back to the bank, back to the same gentleman, and he says, where are my ownership papers? See, for him, ownership of self, ownership agency, ownership of that land, all of that meant the same. Where are my ownership papers? Man said, come back next week. He came back again. Sir, where are my ownership papers? The man looked at me and said, you better get out of here. He never came back because he couldn't. He could not challenge this man, this professional man, this banker, not as a black man, not as a man without education, not at that time. And so he lost it. He lost everything that he put into it. He didn't trust banks, he didn't trust loans, and I forgot that. That's what I mean when I talk about practice. You've got to practice the thing. Right now, black wealth is on its way to hitting zero. I'm about to start working in Boston, and in Boston, wealth right now for white families is on average $250,000, and for black people, it's $8. It will hit zero in 5 years. And I keep playing in my mind over and over again, what happens when the wealth hits zero and the water starts to rise? And sadly, I don't have to imagine the answer, Because I lived through Hurricane Katrina and I saw when every system failed, when housing failed, education system failed, elder care failed, business supports failed, everything failed around one another. I remember driving up and down Interstate 10 between Mobile and Slidell, and we were passing supplies and information to one another. And I remember realizing at that point that the way we made it through that was because we became friends with each other. We became family to each other. And I think that will be the only thing that will make it. So as you leave today, I probably leave you with one question. What does repair look like for you? And more importantly, I want you to propose that question to every business that you go to, everyone you speak to. What does repair look like? Because we have all inherited a very extractive economy that has left the people broken and the land devastated. We've got to get into an embodied practice around repair, one that challenges this notion that you can do anything by yourself, because the reality is nobody makes it alone. Nobody. And if you were to make it to Mobile, I'd take you to one of my favorite places, right along the Mobile Bay, where the Africans, my family, stood, scared, alone, crying, praying to God that they could see their friends and their family again. And you and I would make a pledge to one another that we would do the work of repair on their behalf. We would do this and we would become for others the kinds of friends, the kinds of family that they should have had. You are who they were waiting for. I thank you all.
Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now.
Wow. Yo, show some love for all those speakers this morning. She was just like sitting, but I feel like in her head, she was just like, I'm gonna tell you all what's up right now, and you're gonna pay attention. Like, I just want to introduce you all to someone kind of like at the center of, like, you heard a lot about love and connection and purpose and passion. The center of all that for me, so that's my son. That's my 10-month-old son and my beautiful wife. And yes, I will use any excuse I can to show off my son. There he is again. Yeah, so we're out there, we're doing some hiking. And so we're like outside of a comic store right now, and he's very much like in character, like taking off like Super Baby. So when he was about 3 months old, my wife and I, mainly me, had the brilliant, but actually not so brilliant idea of taking him to a basketball game. So we went to a Sixers versus Warriors game, and we're like, all right, he'll have a fun time. He'll see all the lights and the excitement, and it'll be cool. Had him in the carrier. I was gonna put him down for a nap. It did not work out that way at all. It was just too much stimuli, and I just needed to take him out of the arena. And so I had him in the carrier, and so we'd spent a decent amount of money to go into this game. And I spent just about the entire game with him in the carrier trying to keep him sleeping basically in the corridor in between the court where you could see the game and the hallway where you go to the concession stand and everything, right? And you might think, all right, maybe I was disappointed because I'm missing the game, but it was actually one of the best experiences that I've had as a father over the past 10 months, because countless people, mainly men and mainly men of color, kept coming up to me over and over again, getting away from the game just to say hi, to talk about their experience as dads, to talk about the trials and tribulations of losing sleep, of trying to figure out how to feed your kid, of just the love that they felt as dads. And I remember walking away from that experience thinking, what people might typically talk about when it comes to dads, or what they might talk about, especially when it comes to men of color who are dads, that is not at all the experience that I was seeing and feeling in that moment. That was a lens-widening moment. We were just completely changing the way that narrative is written, the way that it's scripted when you think about, again, men of color and you think about dads. So that's what, in many ways, like this is all about. That's what you've been hearing about this morning, are these ways that people are writing new narratives for themselves and writing new narratives for other people and widening that lens. So it's important that all of you have an opportunity and a chance to do that. So here's a way that you can participate. Can we get that slide back up? So if you're on Twitter, this should only take you like a minute. At some point today or tomorrow, get on Twitter and post this. You may not know that I blank, fill it in, whatever feels relevant to you. Widen your own lens, widen the lens of other people, but don't just put that out there into the world. Again, this is the ideas about connectedness and community, right? So if you see that somebody else has posted something that resonates with you, comment on it, like it, retweet it, contribute to that conversation, help other people to feel like by being courageous, by putting themselves out there, that you're there with them. That's what we're trying to do with this conference, with widening the lens, with building this community. So again, today and tomorrow, join this conversation, add your voice to it, and help other people to learn a little bit more about you, and you'll have a chance to learn more about other people and to change that narrative. With that, as you're perhaps thinking about what you might be posting or you're posting already, we got a lot of stuff coming up for the rest of the day. The next round of sessions are going to be starting out at 11 o'clock. So we slid that time a little bit here, so you have a little bit time to get yourself gathered and collected before you go into those next sessions. We got a lot of big sessions happening in the atrium. We talked about plant-based food being a staple here at the conference. That's going to be served, I believe, in Hall E for lunch. For the scavenger hunt, if you haven't heard about it already, participate in the scavenger hunt, go to the Net Impact booth. There are going to be a lot of prizes, I believe up to $500 is going to be one of the awards, so definitely you want to find a way to be able to participate. And then to close out the day, we're going to do it Detroit style. We're going to be getting onto the Princess for a Motown cover band. If y'all ain't familiar with Motown music or Motown dance moves, come and hit me up, all right? I got you. All right? Everyone, let's go conquer. Have a good one. Peace.